Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod live with Winnie and Clarkey. Round 4 is officially in the books, and what I'll say is, look, after 2 rounds, Winnie, I thought I was starting to see some trends and some insights into who might be a top team this year, who might be more towards the bottom, but these last 2 rounds have really humbled me in terms of not only my ability to be successful betting, but even just get a tip right. There's seen some absolute outsiders getting up, mate, but a good round for the best bets overall, mate. Break it down from that lens for us. How are you and how'd the best bets go?
Well, that's the thing, that generally when punters don't do well, we don't use that as an excuse. We don't hide behind, the results were shocking this week and no one could win. We actually want to win when the unexpected happens, and that's the beauty of this league. And a good round for the TryPod. 3-1 on best bets, won the mixed matchup again as well. But I'm quite bitter because we were 4-0 sweeping with about 10 minutes to go. The footy of the Savo, the first game we can talk about is Tigers-Warriors, where we've got a 6-point lead and we were laying 3.5 with the Tigers. It looked like maybe the lead was going to get 10-12. That tries disallowed. Warriors come back. Great game, great win by the Warriors. But it's just, for me, it's just, I'll just whinge. Bad year last year, and I just felt like we never got those last-minute wins that we pinched with a late try where we won the close one. But we had more than our fair share where it goes against us. And even this year, like you look at 7 winners, none of them have even been close, right? They're all coasting, but there's been multiple losses already that's been snatched away from us. So, I'm greedy. I'll always want a little bit more. I was just telling you, we don't have a clip from Tristan. We probably don't have any additional information exactly how the transition to better goes, but we'll try and get some on that for Tuesday. I dare say Tristan would probably tell me if the footy was going to be like this every weekend, he probably wishes he didn't sell, because I'm sure it was a great weekend for the bookies. I wanted to say that well done to our hired guns. We have, of course, had Matty, the Undertaker, and the Padonis on the same unders tip. So when they both picked the identical tip independently out of any side or total for the whole round, and you could even include try scorers, was there ever any doubt? Then on top of that, Benny Howard, who is in South America at the moment, he didn't get his clip into the show. So when I keep our hired guns record, sadly, I actually can't count that, but he did post it with a write-up in the group. The same tip again, under in the Sharks Dogs game. It goes under by 22 points. So well done to those guys. I mean, 3 of them independently, all on the exact same pick. So overall, a really good round. I think this is one of those rounds where it pays to follow the pod because conventional wisdom didn't go too well. In fact, just on that note of following the pod and the value you do get, I did post a little clip online about this today, but the winless teams, 6 winless teams played at home in the last 2 rounds. We were on 5 of them, and those teams did go 5-1 against the spread. The only time a winless team didn't cover the spread at home was the Dolphins last week, who were up 10 second half. But you had Titans last week, you had Eels last week covered, you had Dragons upset this week, you had Dolphins covered, and Cowboys got their first win as well, and several of those were best bets. So we've done reasonably well on that principle.
Asterisk next to the Dolphins there as well, because the game was played in Redcliffe, and of course they're not the Redcliffe Dolphins, they're the Dolphins, and they weren't in the. So a bit of an asterisk there, mate. Let's go straight to what we just witnessed there in the final game of the round. I can see a lot of people blowing up the Instagram comment section there live about the results. Some feeling C&K milked it. Others saying that the refs were on the way of the Tigers, but officially the Warriors do win 26 points to 24. My prediction coming into this game, I had an unders play. I thought there would be less points than this scored, particularly in what was forecasted to be wet weather conditions, and ended up that way. And I did lean the way of the Warriors, but not too strongly to any significance there. Main takeaway for me, great tough game of footy from both sides. Tough conditions, and both sides stepped up to the plate for the entire 80 there. It was back and forth, and I think that made it really unpredictable and a super exciting game just from a neutral point of view there. Personally, I wasn't a fan when Chance Nickel-Klookstar stayed down for that penalty, but I can also appreciate the gamesmanship around that and knowing when to stay down and what to do in those crucial final 10 minutes when the scores are equal. Now, that same, maybe not gamesmanship, but that same composure was probably missing from the Tigers, most notably in the final 5 minutes where Solomon Fatape, for some reason, doesn't dive on that ball and boots it out. Like, if you're going to boot the ball, at least make it a good kick. It goes 10 metres and out. And then Taruva makes a half break and no one's a dummy half. So, a bit of composure missing there in the final 5 minutes. But I will say for the Tigers, no Adam Dewey, No Samuel Fainu. They lose both, one in the warm-up, one during the game. So there are some excuses that I can offer here for the Tigers. And I'll just finish on the Chancellor Cook-Star penalty, Winnie. I think it's one of those ones where if your own team gets awarded it, you kind of say in your own mind, oh, yeah, there was some contact with the head. But every other fan of the game looks at it and goes, yeah, that's pretty soft. But look, it was one of those games, super close. We can't be certain the better side won, and still some positives to take away for both teams, mate. How did you see it from your point of view?
Yeah, I like the comment there from Mike Brown. He mentioned that every underdog covered the line in round 4. So I think that's correct, other than Cowboys Raiders was a pick 'em. I didn't actually get a chance to look closely at whether the Cowboys did close in a mild favourite, possibly a slightly short favourite. But if you put a pick 'em game aside, you're right. Like Bunnies, outright upset, cover Thursday night. We get the Titans outright upset, the Dolphins cover, Dragons is an outright upset, and then you pick 'em Cowboys, who we were on, Bulldogs outright upset. The Eels game, they cover with the final play, a meaningless but meaningful to some. Grubber in behind the line takes a margin from 20 to 14 and covers for Para. Like, that's the type of game I nearly played, but I just feel like there's no way we would have got that try if we needed it for the meaningless cover, so I'm not even really too salty about it. And then the Warriors were the underdog and outright upset. So massive weekend for underdogs for sure. Yeah, this game, so it didn't start well. You lose Dewey in the warm-up. Tough conditions. It was wet as well. It was raining. So for there to be 50 points in this game was surprising. I thought the conditions suited the Warriors better, and they did get out in front. And then the Tigers were in a bit of disarray when Taruva had to go. Speaking of milking it, Taruva didn't really get hit in the head. Tried to milk a penalty, and it cost him 15 HIA. And that's actually a good thing that players have to be aware of. If you're trying to earn a penalty for your team and you're going to rock your head back and you're going to get up slow, it could actually hurt your team, because then when Fainu was out as well, the whole back line was shuffled. The Warriors did score during that time. I loved the counter-attack long-range try that was set up by Galvin that got the Tigers back into it just before halftime, but the Warriors returned the favour early second half. You know who pulled the Tigers' pants down today, Clarkey? It was your man Wade Egan. He had them in a blender multiple times in this game, but it was the Tigers who got back in front. I thought, as I said before, that Buller, with a wicked move on the centre, had sealed the win. However, fair enough, there was an obstruction in the leader. It didn't change the fact that he skinned his man 1-on-1, but it did change the fact that it was not game over. And then what hurts me is Halasima, the winning try. It's a long-range try. I called out in the preview, Leotawa. He sort of smelt it on the blind side, drew the man, sends Halasima down the sideline. But the Tigers should have had that covered. Bad miss for mine by Buller, followed by Bird. So Halasima beats them both, scores. And that's essentially their winning try for me, although it only leveled it up. But then the very next set, the Warriors get to the 40, get the very soft pen. And then you're right, like Luai, beautiful kick in behind for Tarpe. It's second tackle. So if he gets on the ball, it's a massive chance to attack with 3 or 4 minutes to go for West. Boots it. Now, if that boot stays in, we could get that miracle try. We could actually get that cover. But I just never expect that from Pod Best Bets, unfortunately. You just got to work so hard to win those. And then, as you say, the other thing about the Taruva mistake was the chip over the top that Taruva caught perfectly in stride. I actually thought he could have released his centre. Was it Toa? Just inside him? I actually thought if he did a catch and pass, CNK was completely out of play, was racing up trying to get the ball. So I actually thought there was a real chance for the Tigers to score there. It wasn't to be, and that's not for me to take away from a real great fight back and tight win for New Zealand, because we questioned whether there was enough points in them. I was very nervous. I should say we had 30 on the board for the mixed matchup, which should have been more than enough. New Zealand gets 26, and a late try would have sunk the mixed matchup. So I'm glad that although we didn't win the best bet, we hung on there. And New Zealand, impressive fight back, you have to say too.
Yeah, definitely. It was an impressive fight back for the Warriors. All things considered, they did what the Tigers did last round or the round before to the Dolphins. Was the way I saw that. They hung in there. The door was left ajar, and then that came over the top, mate. Let's rewind it all the way back to Thursday night, where the Rabbitohs defeat the Penrith Panthers 28 points to 18. Now, my prediction coming in here was I leaned the way of the Panthers at the line, but not too strongly. Keep in mind that was a 10.5 line, so well off with my prediction in this game. Biggest takeaway, I just think over the last 5 years, I can't recall too many times where we've seen the Penrith Panthers beat themselves. And whilst I do want to give a great ton of credit to the Bunnies here, they were awesome, I do have to acknowledge, particularly early, Penrith were lacking that sense of urgency. And I think from that point, they kind of lost their composure. They felt like they were chasing points where, even in their most famous comeback, which was, of course, the 2023 grand final, there was no panic. There was no sense of we're really chasing this. They kind of just got back into their rhythm and what they wanted to do, and it came consistently there. I felt they pushed the pass a little bit too hard in this one. They had 16 offloads to the Rabbitohs 4, so that sums up they were really trying to throw that ball out the back, and that led, ironically, to 16 errors. So for every offload, an error there. Over the fence to the Rabbitohs, a really nice victory to get back on track. Not an 80-minute performance by any means, but at least they can take the 2 competition points against what's been the strongest side for a number of years now and build on that. Final point for me, though, Winnie, we don't often see Penrith lose 2 in a row. They've now lost 3 in a row and have not won since Las Vegas. I feel for the Cowboys, who will play them next round as Nathan Cleary is expected to return. I feel the Panthers are going to be absolutely stinging at 3 losses in a row and come out firing against the poor Cowboys, mate. Break this one down for us. How did you say it?
That's a good point. Not just their pride, but the fact is you can't start too slow where you get too far away from the top 4, which is where you want to be, to win 5 in a row. And there were still signs from Penrith in this game that impressed me as well, as crazy as it is to say. But my first point I'm going to go with it is I thought the line was too high. And I had a plus 12.5. It was 12.5 on 365. I had that as one of my best bets. And then just, you've got to keep refreshing the lines and keep looking right up to the last moment where we go live. And it ticked down to 11.5. And I just decided to leave it as a lean, as I said on Tuesday. So then when I watched the game Thursday night, I'm kind of be more happy if Penrith just gets out and gets a good win. And, of course, it's 28-0 to the Bunnies at halftime. So it's just a classic case of if I leave it alone, it's going to be the easiest bet you'll ever have. And the Panthers lost Sorensen early as well. So you really just start to take notice of how many class players. You go back to who was lost in the off-season and who has been dropping out of this Penrith team throughout this year. And it's not the same team. So you can't just expect them to be unbeatable. But meanwhile, the Bunnies, what really stood out to me is how deadly is that left side attack. Like when they go to the right post and when they come back on the left and it's Walker, he's got Koloamatangi playing on an edge, got Jack Whiten outside him, Gray is sweeping out the back, and Alex Johnston, the greatest finisher, probably ends up the greatest try scorer of all time, is on the end of it. And I don't know if you've got the news on how bad the shoulder injury was. It's really sad to see, return from injury game. Do we know? Is he hopefully not out too long?
Yeah, so they suspect it's a fractured scapula, so shoulder issue there.
No.
But Wayne Bennett did say post-game he doesn't think it'll be too long. So I think I saw the NRL physio put something up around the 4 to 8 week mark potentially.
That's pretty sure same injury that Cooper Cronk played the 2018 grand final. So, but no, that is pretty sad because that left edge was dynamite. Penrith couldn't handle it. So having said all that, Ryan has commented, and I believe the same. Like, if the Leota try stands, Penrith may have come back. But the Bunnies had no juice late in the game. It was an 18-point margin. I know there's still a bit of heavy lifting to do, but Leota slams that down. Or maybe it was 16 points, I think, at the time. 16 or 18. But, yeah, I think Leota try would have cut it to 10.
Yep.
And there was plenty of time, and Penrith was coming for the Bunnies. And when that got called a knock on, it just, gave the ball back to Souths. A few more minutes bled off the clock. And it forced Penrith to play a little bit more frantic, still being down 3 tries. I hate that call, by the way. Look, I don't blame the ref in real time. It sort of looked like the ball might have sprayed out the side, and the ref's going to call a knock on. But the bunker got to see it. And I just don't understand. It really seems to me like the bunker sometimes just likes to back up the on-field ref, like to have their back. But it's not about that. It's just about getting the call right. There was no separation, slamming the ball on the ground. I mean, why can't we get that call right? Everyone else could see it's a try for mine. So the Bunnies hold on. It's just typical Bennett. They can do enough to win, and they've been sort of pinching these wins. And in this case, the Bunnies played so well in the first half that they, laid the foundation. And the other man that had a forgettable night, Dane Laurie, maybe Penrith would have been better with sticking with Jenkins, who was so good in Melbourne, and maybe letting Talangi have a start. But you're right. the back-to-back champs, 1 and 3. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I would not have. I would not have put any money on that because, the only game when you looked at this in the preseason that you thought they would struggle with is probably the Storm. You would have tipped them in every other game and possibly even in that Storm game, if I'm absolutely honest. So, unpredictable stuff there from the Bunnies. Completely echo your thoughts on the Moses Leota no try. What I hate most about that is referees are forced to go up with a try or no try. If I can quickly reference the Joe Offhand Gowie try today for the Eels. The Seagulls, the ball's put down here, and the Seagulls defender is completely obstructing the referee's call, and he sends it up as a try. But he has no evidence. He kind of comes to the side and pretends like he has a look at the end. If the referee's not sure, why can't we just rely on the video evidence and say, hey, unfortunately, I couldn't get a view of that. Can you please check it with an unbiased view? Because, fair enough, he went up as no try. But as you said, then it's the boys protecting the boys culture. It's like when I watch a captain's challenge, mate, and I just know that unless it is 100% the wrong call by the referee, they just back their boys up. No chance to win a captain's challenge because they don't want to make each other look bad. These guys aren't just colleagues. These referees are all friends. They're backing up the boys. And it really is frustrating, mate. Let's go on. Let's not divulge.
I know we don't want to dwell on it too long, but for me, it's like it's 50-50 in the ref's mind. It happens real time. It's really fast, but he has to make a call. All right. There's always going to be 50-50 ones. Even in replay, there are going to be ones we're not certain. But what's happening is the bloke in the bunker gets 12 looks at it in slow motion with 5 different camera angles, and he's 80-20 sure that it is a try, but he doesn't call the try because the on-field soft call, or the other way around. And so because you forced that first call, which didn't always used to be the rule, and I'm just not sure where the advantage is. I know at some point someone's going to have to make a judgment call. We're going to live with it. We're not all going to agree. But I'd rather that be the person that got the benefit of 10 slow motion replays.
I remember watching Origin back in the day as a kid, and the video ref was unsure. He literally cannot try benefit of the doubt, where the ref didn't send up as try or no try. The video ref just thought it was so close to being a try that it likely was. But look, let's pause our thoughts there. Let's do an NRL 180 and get back away from the controversies of the game, because otherwise we probably could be talking all night.
I know you really want to rush into the next one, mate.
Oh, of course. My mighty Titans, they get up against the Sydney Roosters, 30 points to 12. And I did have my Titans winning in this one with my pre-game prediction at a +6.5 line. And my biggest takeaway, guys, and I don't want to sound too biased here, but it was just the consistency in which the Titans applied themselves on defense again. Now, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't as dominant as that scoreline really suggests, but it was a game where when it came down to the goal line defense, the Titans were simply superb there yet again. But let me call a spade a spade. I gave the Knights flowers last year and said they weren't too bad. They were just it didn't execute in certain areas. I can't say the same for the Roosters. They were bad. A 57% completion rate here. That is just not going to threaten the Clavelli Crocs local A-grade comp side, if I'm absolutely honest. Now, the Roosters have typically always had really poor completion rates. You look through the 2020s, and even when they won back-to-back in 18-19, their completion rates were not that high. But they always had so much class and experience that it didn't really matter. They'd make an error, but then Joseph Suaalii or Joseph Manu would come up with an X-factor play 2 sets later, and, it would make up for that. They can't do that anymore. That's clearly not the case with their 2025 roster. Now, they had 19 errors in this game, and they conceded 8 penalties. I haven't checked for certain, guys, but certainly off the top of my mind, I cannot remember stat lines worse than that for an NRL team. 19 errors. That is absolutely shocking. So my final point here, Winnie, as much as I'm going to praise my Titans and say our goal line defense was absolutely brilliant again, I think that equally needs to be shared at how poor the Roosters' ball control was and just some fundamentals they got wrong, mate. Did you see the game in a similar fashion?
Yeah, you sort of won the game by clinging on in the first half. I was less than convinced. I didn't feel confident because it looked like the Roosters were on top. It also, your defense was not comprehensive. There were multiple times where particularly Tedesco, who unfortunately no dice for Benny Williamson, had him as his try scorer. It looked like the Titans refused to or could not tackle him. Teddy would be running around the midfield with players falling off him, marching, looked like he had spiders on him. But the Titans bent but didn't really break in the first half. And to cling on and be 6-all when you weren't the better team, that's the mark of a good side, is that if you can defend well, you always have a chance of getting a game. And the 18-point margin's not a reflection of the difference between these sides. In fact, it was the Tricolours again that looked stronger. That's after you took the lead with a penalty goal. The Roosters struck back. The Roosters were in front and on the attack. And as Ryan commented, and a couple of people have commented, like the Jaden Campbell intercept try, length of the field, flips the game. And I've talked about that. We sit here, we just spent a whole segment just, having a whinge about waxing lyrical about the bunker, right? And big calls can really affect games, but there is no bigger play than the intercept try when one team was probably going to score and it ends up 6 points the other way. That legitimately is a 10, 12-point swing. And in this case, in the Titans' favor. But credit to your Titans, because instead of being like, oh, we're in front by 6, what do we do? Like, can we cling on here? The Titans put the foot down. And when other teams would just be thinking, let's not make a mistake, or are we trying to add a field goal, the Titans executed another backline play and increased their lead. And, of course, let's not forget that a minute or so to go, the Roosters, who are a bit frantic because they're down a couple of scores, spill the ball. AJ pounces on it 30 or 40 metres out, takes it the other way. That gets the Titans total to 30. We needed all 30 of those points, basically, to win the mixed matchup because the Warriors did finish on 26. So let me thank the punting gods for that one, because that was pretty lucky. We didn't know at the time, but that was a very valuable points. And such a strong response from your team now. That's 2 performances you'd be mighty proud of after how worrying it looked for the Titans, especially 20 minutes into this season where they'd already let in 4 tries. And since then, in the next, how's my maths? The next 200 minutes plus, you've only conceded 3 tries.
Yeah, you're right. Literally, 200 minutes. We've only conceded 3. But
it would be 20 minutes, 4 tries, and then 220 minutes, 3 tries.
Yeah, that's like that. That's the Titans for you. We have been have really, really bad patches all of a sudden out of nowhere, and we did start our season in worrying form there, mate. Let's move on to the next Friday night game where the the Broncos defeat the Dolphins, 20 points to 12. And my prediction coming into this one, I had the Broncos winning and a couple of try scorers where neither did cross there. So another one I didn't get right. Biggest takeaway, guys, just think that, it was a Battle of Brisbane. It was played in torrential conditions, and no doubt that affected the attacking quality of this game. But defensively, both sides shown a lot of effort and desire there. You could tell it was a rivalry game. And I think regardless of weather, even if it was sunshine and rainbows in this game, we got the exact result most people expected, where the Dolphins are going to try really hard, but the Broncos are just a better side at the moment. And that's pretty much how I saw it, mate. Weather conditions aside, we got the result that most people thought we would. Again, I'll reiterate the same as last week. I'm loving Adam Reynolds' composure at the moment for his side. They had less time with the ball and they had less meters than the Dolphins, but you look at his 733 meters kicked, and that's more than both the Dolphins halves combined. So really great composure and kicking games shown by Reno in the wet weather there. A few strange or otherwise poor, or if I can just say incorrect decisions from the referee / bunker there. But look, I'll finish with this final point, Winnie, and I'm sorry to say so. We discovered this in the preview. Dolphins, they moved to 0-4, so no side in NRL history has ever started 0-4 and gone on to play finals. So Christian Wolf is now chasing history in his inaugural season as a rookie head coach in the NRL. It's going to be really tough from here for the Finns, mate. But how did you see this game in particular?
So speaking of bad bunker decisions, I was at the ground. So you tell me if I missed one. I like in real time, I didn't realize that Cobbo stood on the line when he saved a 40-20. If we're talking about that. So let's say the Dolphins would have scored there and the Broncos wouldn't have scored. And then that swings the result by 12 points and the Dolphins win the game. I might be clutching at straws a little bit because, to be honest, the Broncos could have probably done a bit more if they needed to, but Brisbane had a comfortable lead. And with those veteran halves, they sort of played very conservative in the second half. And I have to say, as I say, I was there. A shout out Barney's in the chat as well, and he helped me secure those tickets. It's a hot ticket. It was a sellout game, but unfortunately, due to the torrid conditions, they only got 45,000 from a possible 52 at the game. And I did see some people leave early because it was pretty torrential and we were not undercover. So I got pretty soaked, which you sort of think helps a big underdog keep it closer. And in a way, it did ultimately. And we won the best bet. We covered the plus 14.5. Brisbane got nowhere near 44 points. But I also thought that those type of conditions doesn't suit a mobile, fast team like the Finns, whereas Brisbane obviously packs a bit more power. But getting back to the Dolphins, when they did have opportunities to score, the Dolphins were wasteful. Whereas when the Finns did make a mistake, Brisbane was clinical. Brisbane really made the Finns pay for it. Shibasaki justified his selection with a double. To me, I thought Staggs comes in, you stick it with Mariner. But Shibasaki owning that left centre spot for now. The best bet didn't look great first half when the Finns are down 10, and I was worried the conditions are so bad that the Dolphins would have to press a little bit, which can lead to errors, and I could have easily seen that game spiraling. But it probably goes back to the fact that I took the Dolphins saying the line was too high, but also in some games, teams just give up. So, this is too hard. But in the Battle of Brisbane, you sort of knew you would get a fight till the end. And that's what the Dolphins did. It was a fair arm wrestle second half as the rain really came down. I have to say, for the Dolphins to still compete at a high level, never quit, that got us the cover, though Brisbane controlled it. And being there in person too, really seeing the violence of some of the hits that Paddy Carrigan, Payne Haas, Ricky dished out is scary. I wouldn't want to be out there copping those. And we were talking a bit about how the Dolphins get back in the game. And of course, I was crying out for more involvement from the Hammer. I will say, while he seems to be kept quiet and you just felt like Brisbane was not going to be easily broken down, I just wanted the Hammer to get the ball out wide and a defender could slip or you just get somebody on their heels. But it wasn't the Hammer's type of game because it was so slippery and just because he's not an ultimate acceleration type player, like even a Walsh with the quicker feet. The Hammer just needs that little bit more of a wind-up and just probably didn't get the space he needed on that occasion. So I did say on Tuesday, didn't I? I wasn't greedy. I'll just take a cover and a good fight. I got that. But then when I take a step back from it, my team hasn't won a game. We're 4 weeks in. And it's sort of how you felt 12 months ago. It's like your season's sort of already over before it began, which does hurt personally.
It does hurt personally, mate. One of the beauties about being live is Sports Music God from YouTube has actually corrected my stat there. He said the Sharks did make the finals in 2015 after starting 0-4, and I quickly checked that while you were talking. That's true. The Sharks did start 0-4. They lost some tight games there and recovered to 6th position. So one side has done it in NRL history. ChatGPT.
You know what's funny about that? I know this is really weird, but I can remember a text from 10 years ago, and the Broncos played the Sharks, and my mate was a staunch Sharks fan, and he messaged in the group chat something like, "These are two garbage teams. Doesn't even matter who wins. They're both." And I'm like, "No, they're both actually really good, even though they haven't been winning. They're both pretty good teams." And you think about, they've actually both made the next 2 grand finals. Yeah. But there you go. So a little bit of hope, and that's an aquatic creature as well. So maybe there's still life in my Finns.
Hey, that I've actually got a new sponsor coming on from next week with interesting stats going into the round. I'm going to steal that one from you. The last side to go 0-4, but still make finals was an aquatic creature. I'm going to put that one up. That's awesome. Let's move on to Super Saturday, mate. We have the Dragons defeating the Storm 14 points to 8, and you guys guessed it. My prediction coming into this one was wrong again. I had the Storm covering the line, and I told you guys it's one of my more confident picks. I didn't see this from the Dragons at all, but my biggest takeaway was what a letdown by the Storm. Similarly, I did not see this from them at all. And I think sometimes, guys, you can learn a lot in footy. You can learn a lot from a tight win. I remember a few years ago, the Panthers were in Newcastle and they escaped with a tight victory over the Knights by 2 points. And the next week, I can't remember, but they easily won. And I kind of saw that with the Storm from last round. They let the Panthers get right back into that game. And I just think that this is a Storm side that maybe they do need a loss to really kick themselves back into gear. I'd hate to be whoever plays them this round because they just weren't themselves here. Their spine looked absolutely disjointed. Their forwards didn't generate all that much momentum, and their outside backs showed poor decision-making. So it was really poor across the park. And one round later, after a disappointing or rather disappointing effort against the Nathan Cleary-less and Dylan Edwards-less Panther side, we didn't see any improvement in those areas. So potentially it will take a loss, and we'll have to eagerly watch and see how they respond next round. Meanwhile, across the fence, the Dragons, and I'm sorry, Dragons fans, if you're in the house, but there was honestly nothing special about this game at all. Now, they did remain tough. That I will say that. Like, they did have opportunities to lose this game, but they remained tough. But that's kind of a fundamental and an expectation in the NRL. If you want to win games, you got to hang tough, right? And they just looked like a side that was desperate for their first win, and they met a Storm side that's clearly been off for 2 weeks in a row now. And maybe, well, how do I say this politely? That's not sustainable for the Dragons. A great victory, but you're not going to be on the up, desperate for a win every week, meeting a side that was undefeated and is in a down spot, travelling for the first time this year as well, where they'd previously had all their games at home. So, look, the Dragons, I will give them credit in the fact that they simply did want it more and they were willing to compete harder than the Melbourne Storm, and that's where the Storm fell short for me. Final point for me, mate, is, I'll just reiterate, Dragons, they're on the board, but I don't leave too impressed, and I'm not certain that is sustainable for them moving forward. I think that they can rightfully enjoy a win over the premiership favourites in the Melbourne Storm, but there is still plenty of work to be done, in my view. I'll hand it over to you. Do you think I'm being a little bit too critical of the Dragons there, or do you kind of echo some of those thoughts?
Oh, possibly. It's still an impressive win, however you boil it down. To me, the first thought is like, if you had anywhere near that application, you win the game going away against Souths. It's sort of annoying when you see what teams are capable of, but then you think about points that they've left begging. And a team like the Dragons, who narrowly missed the 8 last year, they can't afford to do that. There's so many good comments coming through. There's another stat for you to check, because Sports Music God says Manly was 0-4 in 2021. I do sort of recall that too, where Turbo was out, and then the second he got back, they just started winning games. But you can double check that one. Lots of comments about the Hammer not playing, and I'm not playing well. I was having this conversation with Alexi, the man who was in your seat for 6 or 7 seasons, at least 6 seasons of the pod, mate, of course. And I said, the Hammer, like, I don't want to get into his relationship stuff, but he looks too happy. He's too relaxed. He's too happy. He needs like that mongrel about him. What was the other comment I noticed? Oh, Jeremy saying that Joe from the pub, he hasn't had a happy weekend either. As for this game, this is a classic game where most people would have just said it doesn't really matter about the spot for the Dragons. You're just taking Melbourne Storm. But it was the Dragons who meant business. You could see that they'd had a long time to stew on that horrible Bunnies loss, and also probably came in ultra fit because they got a flogging. I know there's mandatory breaks players have to get in a bye week, but I'm sure Flanagan pushed the envelope as much as he could with his time in the lead up to this game. And it was still the Storm that led at halftime, and I sort of had that feel to me of Melbourne are just going to be too good in the key moments. You get that big try to Pappy just before halftime, but that was where it ended for the Storm. They never scored again. The Dragons had more energy. It was another game affected by weather, slippery conditions, and stop-start. And I think that really helped the Dragons, who like to play ugly and drag you into the trenches. And it didn't allow the Storm to play a sort of a free-flowing game. But you also have to say that was because St. George didn't allow Melbourne to do that, staying very disciplined, connected defensively. Such a contrast to letting the Rabbitohs into the game so easily 2 weeks ago. And sometimes that's what it takes, is just a team that is dialed in and just wants it more. And at home, desperation kind of fueled the Dragons to hang on. You're looking a little forlorn, or you've got a bit of a cheeky grin on your face.
Don't bring the comment up on screen. Just you'll see what comment I'm talking about as I take over. Don't bring that up on screen, but it's a beauty. Let's move on. Game 5, Cowboys defeat the Raiders 30 points to 20. At this point, I should just sign.
I've just caught up now as well.
Yeah. At this point, I should just log off, guys. I should just leave the studio. Yeah, and he's brought it up. I should just leave the studio and get out of here because I had the Raiders head-to-head, so I really struggled through this round. Biggest takeaway, though, for me, guys, is whoever the Raiders outside backs coach is, take them aside on the first day back at training, throw a couple bums up with some pressure, because they put themselves under so much pressure by consistently fumbling the ball in what would otherwise be regulation catches for a lot of other wingers and fullbacks under pressure. I counted 5 errors there, potentially 1 less, potentially some more. But look, it just reminded me of the Manly game, where in the Manly game, their discipline was poor. They gave too many penalties and set restarts, and eventually it was too much to overcome. They piled up the pressure on themselves. in this game, they weren't, well, they were discipline poor, but that wasn't the reason why they piled the pressure on. It was because they just kept turning the ball over and giving repeat sets by not being able to catch it. Then we turned to their discipline and the amount of repeat sets they gave up, and it was just poor. It was really poor. The shine has quickly worn off the Raiders for me in these last 2 weeks, where I was willing to give excuses for the Manly game because they were so impressive in the opening 2 games. Now it's back to my preseason thoughts. This is a side that can beat anyone if there's an occasion for Ricky Stewart to emotionally motivate them. When it's a regulation game like this one was, and it's a 50-50 coin flip, this Raiders side isn't going to win because they're not emotionally up for it. You know, this Raiders side looked so different to the side in Las Vegas and against the Broncos as well. I thought they also failed to execute during the Cohen Hess sin bin period. That was really costly and a huge missed opportunity for them there. Final point, I'll go to the Cowboys. Some positive signs there, most notably for me, their halves connecting again. And I did like that last year when Clifford and Dearden connected. Hopefully they can maintain that level of consistency because that will give the Cowboys a real shot in a lot of games this year, mate. How do you see this one between the Cowboys and Raiders? I think we had a best bet on the Cows.
Yes, enjoyed that. Had Cowboys, in fact, had plus 1.5 with the Cows. So again, the comments really appreciate them. Ryan saying Eels are at home next week to the Dragons, so Eels still winless. He says I might have to bet Eels to keep up with the trend. And I mentioned the trend at the start of the show, but I did want to just say, of course, this game applied. Cowboys were winless. The desperation was a big factor, but I wasn't just playing that blindly either. I've got to also believe that it's a good spot or that a team we're on is a little underrated or an opponent is overrated. So I tried to bake in several reasons why I liked each play. And getting back to the Dragons upset over Melbourne, that's the one winless team in the last 2 weeks at home that I haven't backed. And of course, it would have been a winner too. But I just had enough reasons to be wary of Melbourne. The fact that they were in the long turnaround, the fact that they were sort of disappointed by the way that Penrith game ended. So, I left that one alone. But that just goes to show that I'm not just, no trend, I think, on its own you play blindly. But if it backs up an opinion you may have, that's where you can find a really strong bet. And for me, it was clear that the Cowboys actually played with life and, dare I say it, a bit of joy. And the way I broke it down probably was the difference where the key players in the spine, Drinky, Dearden, Robbo, all had big games, but also Clifford. He had a double in the first half, in fact. I think the Raiders felt the pinch and the humidity. Another guy that stood out to me, Johnny Bateman. He was in old Raiders form against his former side, which was good to see. You know what? I didn't lose respect for the Raiders. I thought this was a great spot for the Cowboys. The Cowboys got the jump. The Cowboys built a 24-10 lead. And actually, Canberra didn't give in. Canberra fought back, got it to 24-20. And at that point, I thought, we could lose by 2 here. One more Raiders try, we lose by 2. We're catching plus 1.5. And in fact, there was that line break by Savage. If he passes inside, I think it was Paddy on the inside. I think it's a try, So, yeah. I actually thought the fair play the Raiders gave it a shake, but it was a game that the Cowboys had to win, despite what the stats may or may not be, or whether ChatGPT let you down. Let us know if you do know about, if you can confirm the Manly start, right? That's what the Cowboys were staring down the barrel of. They were staring down the barrel of 0-4. And as I said before, lots of great comments come on the stream. Some of them are pretty funny. That is the one advantage I will tell people who listen to this show. You do get watching it on YouTube or Facebook. You've got to put up with looking at our mugs. But sometimes you get to read comments that we, for political reasons or whatever the case may be, we are not able to repeat.
Absolutely, mate. Look, I did actually re-asked ChatGPT the same question we asked on the preview show, but I reworded it differently. Instead of saying playing finals, I said have gone on to finish 8th or higher. Now, it returned to 2001 Knights, 02 Storm, 11 Titans, and 18 Rabbitohs. And then I said, well, what about Manly in 2021? It says, apologies for any confusion earlier. Well, there's not confusion, ChatGPT, but what you have done here is stitch me up. Because I've come on the program on the preview and review show thinking I've got some awesome stat, and it's false. Adding the 15 Sharks, that's 6 teams there that have done it. So not quite as drastic as I unfortunately suggested. Sides have done it, but the fact that it is a small sample size, I suppose, saves me some grace in the fact that it is somewhat rare, but it has been done. So what I'm essentially saying is Dolphins top 4. Game 6, Bulldogs defeat the Sharkies 20 points to 6. And you guys guessed it. I got this one wrong too. I had Sharks covering their line of 11.5. I thought that they would win this game pretty comfortably. But my biggest takeaway is, wow, this Bulldogs side has gone to another level in 2025. I'm really high on them. They don't do it pretty. They don't do it flashy. But they are a bloody hard football side to beat. And they outcompeted the Sharks. Dead set, as simple as that. That's all my analysis needs to be. They outcompeted the Sharks in every aspect of footy, even with the smaller forward pack. They frustrated the Sharks. You had players like Adam Fanua-Blake, who statistically had great stats in this game, but didn't have the impact I thought they might have against a smaller pack. And they didn't allow the Sharks to settle into any form of pattern or groove in attack. They're just a great football side, and I'm so high on Cameron Ciraldo as a coach at the moment. I look at the Bulldogs roster like I did when we previewed this one, and I seriously think if you break it down between spine, backs, forwards, bench, Sharks are stronger in every single aspect, in my view. I don't know what to say too much about the Sharks here. I'm not too hard on them for this. I think they just ran into a really good football side that really wanted to win, missing star players, and wanted to step up and show people that we're the real deal this year. So I don't take too many negatives away from this one for the Sharkies, just because not many sides can get as down and dirty as the Doggies do. So the Sharkies won't find themselves in this sort of trouble consistently. Add in the fact they lost a centre, then they lost their backup centre, leaving them with a 15-man bench. I don't think the Sharks need to worry too much. I think they can recover for this. But then I suppose the question mark for the Sharkies is still, can they maintain a high level of play for 80 minutes? Because that is the one thing we probably haven't seen from them this year. Final point for me, off the topic of rugby league this game a little bit. Whenever Craig Bellamy decides to retire, the Storm should dead set offer Cameron Ciraldo whatever sort of deal and money he wants and have him take over and become their coach. Can you imagine how effective Cameron Ciraldo would be with a superstar roster like the Storms if he could get them all in that competing mindset that he has the Bulldogs in every single week? It's something really special, mate. So I leave this game really high on the Doggies. So I assume you're the same.
You are crowning Ciraldo a coach that has not won a finals game yet. I would just say, hey, there was a coach that burst onto the scene a few years ago and looked to be the new era and the new hotshot, and he won Coach of the Year, and Brisbane threw millions and millions of dollars at him to bring him up and booted Wayne Bennett out of town. And then Brisbane was actually paying that guy millions to leave. So, I probably want to see the Dogs do a bit more. I know everybody's hyped up, and it's amazing for that fan base to have a team that they can be so proud of and so excited about. And there's no reason to detract from the Bulldogs yet. And then I have to say as well, this was the most surprising result of the whole weekend to me. I actually had a lean to the Bunnies, to the Dragons. They were more likely upsets to me, whereas I'll be completely honest, this would have been a best bet Sharks -9.5. So I do talk about how if I could have found that one better key number, I might have played a bet, and sometimes that's going to keep me away. And it doesn't always cost you a winner. Sometimes you can actually avoid a loss. Again, getting back to our hired guns. So the boys have asked for their best bet of the week that they can find that's available for people to hit at the time we are live, 5:30 New South Wales time on a Tuesday. And we got the Padonis. What is Clarkey said? Hold on.
This man will win a premiership. Cut this out, Broncos fans, and put this on your fridge. Just to go back to your last comments.
Yeah, sorry, it hasn't showed up too well. Or maybe it's worth looking at closer if I can. Oh no, now it's gone. Never mind. Getting back to our hired guns, right? Where people really appreciate this. So we get completely independent best tip of the week, and it just made so much sense when you heard Undertaker and Padonis break it down that their best bet was under in Cronulla and Bulldogs. The two teams that are really good defensively, a night game, and some key attacking weapons missing for the Dogs as well. Why was that total 48.5? I was jealous of that handicap. I kind of wished I had picked that one myself. And then what made it even crazier was that Benny Howard, who is in South America at the moment, actually posted in the group that was his favourite play of the week as well. Now, just for the people who are bookkeepers out there or whatever, with the hired guns, what I'll do, I've been keeping a record for every one of them. But the boys, there will be days where, because it's such a tight window and everyone's got commitments, they won't get a tip in every week. So we'll just keep a running units record. And if the tip is not shared on the pod, it's not going to be part of their little mini record that I'll keep for their appearances. But of course, if they're still sharing it with a write-up in the group where they're not restricted by timing or by number of tips, then that could appear in a different record. So 2-2 for the official hired guns, but in fact, 3 of them found it as their best bet of the week. Was it ever any chance of losing? Goes under by 22 points. The Dogs, yes, had been unbeaten, but I did not give them very much chance in this game. When you add up like no Hughes, Kickout, Burton, had beaten the Eels, but very unconvincing last week. I really felt like you missed your big players against your quality opponents. But the Dogs were inspired. Their defense, so forceful. And also the ball carrying. A couple of those tries are just out-muscling Cronulla and never really allowing an opening back in the game. I kept waiting for the moment where it'll swing back to Cronulla and there's still a lot of class on the field for that home team to get back into it. It just never occurred. And I really was impressed by the Dogs' left edge. I mean, Bronson Cherry and Jacob Preston wide running forward out there. Just such classy players. So now the Dogs are 4-4, and the season is set up so well. I believe the Dogs are playing the Knights next week, which is quite winnable too, and then a bye before the Easter game against the Bunnies, where the key men should return as well. So you would have taken 4-1 going into the bye, absolutely, as a Dogs fan, but you got a chance to be 5-0.
Thanks for your breakdown there, Vinny. As Josh Water says on YouTube, he's hit you with Vinny, not Winnie. So I don't know what's going on there, but let's move on.
I've been called much worse.
Yeah, well, that's sure, as have I. Let's move on to the final game of the round. Seagulls defeat the Eels 26-6, and my prediction here was Manly, but I had no other strong lead in this game, just a relatively safe tip. And to be honest with how everything else went this round, I'm not even going to claim that. Biggest takeaway for me, Manly are a great side when they're running downhill. And what I mean by that is they dictate the game's its pace early. And if you let them get away, it's very difficult to rein them back in. Now, for the Eels, they certainly improved with their effort in this one. But at what point do we just start to say that Zach Lomax isn't a centre defensively? And we acknowledge that there's no communication on their edges defensively. Like, there was one particular moment where the centre rushes in and the winger runs wide, literally opening up a free passage for a try there. And it's something that you rarely see in the NRL, the miscommunication there between their backs. So something has to change there for the Eels. The effort's increasing every week. The defensive lapses are increasing. So not too sure what the main reason is there, but certainly from a quantity component, when you look at how many tries they're leaking on the edge, that number's too high. But then when you break it down from a quality issue as well, the tries are just too easy. They're not being hard fought for by the opposition. They're just strolling over a lot of the time with just one player kind of making a little bit of contact. So that's really poor there. Over the fence to the Manly Seagulls. No strong points coming from them on this game, Vinny. I expected them to beat the Eels, and I just think until they're pushed by a quality side or they collect some tough wins away from home, I'm going to continue to respect them as a top side, but I'll still have questions as to whether they're at the very top or not. How do you break this one down for us?
So if I'm Vinny, then Vinny Jr., who plays for Real Madrid's the Brazilian striker, he must be my son then. Mate, well, yeah, I got a little bit triggered when the Eels scored a try on the final play, the old cover play, because I just knew we would never get that. We could punt for 100 more seasons and not get that with a 20-point underdog. So it's sort of like, yeah, that line did feel a bit too high on Tuesday. I didn't take it, and I was happy for it to be a 20-point margin. But that could have burned some punters out there that did lay the high lumber with the biggest line of the week. It was a sloppy game. The biggest takeaway is the fact that Turbo leaves at halftime with an MCL injury, right? This is the same week that your captain said he's going to leave. Though, look, it wasn't a great day for Manly or a great performance, and therefore Cherry didn't probably carve up like many could have envisioned. And I'm sure a lot of people might have had a DCE try. It felt like maybe that was going to be written for this afternoon. And then it would be like one of these games to show, regardless of what the future holds, we're all in with the squad we've got this year. Like, let's make it a memorable season. Let's make it a exciting swan song. It was actually a really ugly win for Manly. But when you lose Turbo, you lose like a third of your attacking threat. And it was wet conditions as well. And the Eels were trying to hang in there. But the problem for Parramatta is that there's just no threat with the footy. So how can you get in these games? And it's the same issue against the Dogs. That game was there to be taken, actually, for the Eels. But I know Riles is a defensive-minded coach. The defense has been not great yet. You sort of say, well, like Serraldo, give him more time to implement his systems and players to get used to it. There's a lot of demands and decision-making, right? But you can't throw attack completely out the window. You've got to be able to pose some threat to your opponent. And as I say, like Paris scores 2 tries today, but one of them's on the final minute. That they never got close enough. So it's actually quite miraculous that they covered the line. And who Para got next week? The Dragons. It's not an impossible win, but it's another team that their season is virtually already over. Although the longer this pod goes, Clarkey, the more teams we're going to find out started 0-4 and made the finals. It seems like I've seen more comments coming through. So it's not the total impossibility that we might have made it out to be, but you never want to be in that position, that's for sure. On that note, I do always think about the Cowboys. If people recall, in 2015, they were 0-3 and down 7 late in round 4 against the Storm, and they get a try, a sideline conversion from JT, a field goal, and then I think another field goal in extra time, win that, go on and win the premiership. And I do often wonder, if they had started 0-4, would they have actually gone all the way that year? So that was a special run. None of these teams are in that sort of boat. But yeah, that Manly team needs Moses back desperately.
Eels team need Moses back, you mean?
Yes. Manly might need him next year.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe you're previewing the 2026 season there. All right, guys, that is all 8 games recapped and broken down from a betting lens. Thank you very much to everyone who has joined us. As always, we'll be back Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. to preview everything round 5. I will tell you everything you want to avoid. Winnie will hopefully give out some more best bets, and we'll have our hired guns back firing from the hip, ready to get the bookies legends. So thank you very much for being with us, and over to you, Winnie, for the final word.
Broken down just like Turbo today, unfortunately. We'll hope that it's not a long period out for Manly. Manly's still finding a way to win, but this was the issues that we brought up pre-season, mostly myself. I think you still had a lot more confidence in Manly, but I talked about it. A team that is heavily reliant on a small number of players is certainly concerning. Look, I suppose I should be happy, shouldn't I? Because it's a pretty strong round to go 3-1 and win a mixed matchup again, but I always want to do a bit better. So that's what I'll try to do on Tuesday. Look forward to see what the Guns bring to the table and look forward to everyone's presence. So see you next Tuesday, guys. Lego.